One of the great things about Survivor is that there is no right or wrong way to play the game. Every Survivor winner to date has taken a unique path to get to the end, all of which are viable strategies and have resulted in them taking out the crown of the sole survivor. Sure, as viewers, we can criticise people's games and have preferences based on our own personal preferred playstyle, but really the aim of the game is to get to the end and get the votes from the jury, and although each winner have taken different approaches to make this happen, in the end they have achieved what the aim of the game is, so we must give each of them credit. This is Analytical Strategy, and today I just want to run through 10 winners' games and long-term strategies they have implemented in order to be the sole survivor and the winner of their season. Each of these strategies are quite different from one another, so it will be very interesting to break each of them down to see which are more viable than others in a wider range of seasons. If you are enjoying these types of videos, remember to subscribe to the channel to assist in its growth. It's quick, it's free, and it's easy. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into these 10 long-term winning Survivor strategies. So firstly, we're going to discuss Ben within Survivor heroes versus healers versus hustlers, and his eventuate strategy of, yes, finding hidden immunity idols. Ben is considered a pretty controversial winner by the public, and also himself as he mentioned within Survivor Winners at War, by relying on idols to get to the end of the game and to eventually get the win. Now I personally think he gets a pretty bad rap, and actually played a pretty good game overall, even with this reliance on idols. Ben was a power player prior to having to implement this strategy once he became a huge target. He was a very social player on the Heroes tribe, and was a player that everyone wanted to work with. And then by merge again he was aligned with a lot of members in the game. This caused him to be labelled as the kingpin of this season, and therefore have a huge target on his back every single tribal council. So what else was he meant to do, other than find idols to keep himself in the game? Ben was able to find 3 idols in a row, play them successfully, and then get to the end via the fire-making twist. Finding idols in my eyes is a completely legitimate strategy, especially if you're in danger. If production is going to continue to plant an idol every time one is played, then taking advantage of this, getting off your butt and going to look for them, and to consistently find them is a completely fair game. Now, will this strategy work long term in many Survivor seasons? Well, I guess that depends on how good you are at finding idols. Technically, with the way Survivor is run today, you could be safe for every single vote of the season prior to making the fire-making challenge if you are that good at finding idols, even if you have the majority vote every single tribal council. But do I think it is the smartest way to play the game? No, I do not. Do I think it is the way Survivor is intended to be played? Absolutely not. But should someone be criticised for taking advantage of the way it is designed in the modern era? Of course not. If you have a problem with the way Ben played, then you really have a problem with production, not with Ben. So up next, continuing with the theme of a controversial win, is the winner of Survivor Samoa, Natalie White. Now Natalie decided to go down the route of riding coattails of a contestant she knew would not poll well in front of a jury. However, he was extremely good at getting to the end of the game. She decided to basically get out of the way, let Russell Hantz run the show, jump on his back, allow him to take all the bullets and clean up all the jury votes by the end of the game. Now many viewers state that Russell should have been the person to win this season, and as a viewer I would have agreed. Now the reason that we're all wrong is we are viewers, we are not out there on the island. We aren't the people living with these contestants, and we are not on the jury making the decision on who should win the game. The jury ultimately makes the call on who should win or lose, and they are the people you need to please. Not me, not you, not any other viewer, it's them. Natalie was able to figure this out. She was able to figure out that although Russell was extremely good at the game, he was not well liked by the people casting the vote for the winner, so she stood a very good chance at beating him if they were to go to the end. Now if Russell and Natalie sat next to a different jury, Russell may have won the game, but you have to appeal to the people you are playing with. So this strategy isn't one that I would expect to work too often, and we are yet to see if Natalie is able to be a part of the big move era of Survivor. But playing to your jury is a strategy that will work every single time, so it really depends on the angle you look at it. So following on from this, we have another Natalie, but this time it is the great Natalie Anderson, the winner of Survivor's San Juan del Sur. Now Natalie played a pretty low-key game to begin with, but her motive to win was inspired by 2 things. Firstly, her sister being voted out first, and secondly, for revenge after Jeremy was voted out of the game. Now many people who play for revenge try to play too hard too fast, try to get their opposition out as quickly as possible, but Natalie had more of a long-term approach on this strategy, as a dish best served cold. Now in order for this strategy to work, it required massive amounts of patience and self-restraint by Natalie, in order to continue to buddy up with John, and to strike when the time was right. Not only was she able to do this so effectively, she was able to do it when he felt so unbelievably comfortable that he left with an idol in his pocket. Not to mention he only played his first one correctly due to Natalie giving him the heads up. I really think this is a strategy that could work in a lot of seasons. Playing the revenge card immediately, sure it might work in the short term, but being patient, having this restraint and striking when the time is right is a phenomenal long-term strategy that is really just an amazing play by an amazing winner, and something I think a lot of upcoming Survivor players can learn from. After Natalie, we are going to go with Boston Rob and his win within Redemption Island. Rob played a very similar game in this season as he did within Heroes vs Villains and All Stars, with playing as a leadership role and an us versus them mentality. He took it to the next level in Redemption Island, implementing the buddy system, having separate camps, having separate meals, really emphasising this us versus them between Ometempe and Zapatera, really enforcing the people in his alliance to hate the opposing alliance so that no funny business or swapping of alliances could occur. The way Rob was able to pull this off was honestly one of the most impressive things I've ever seen on Survivor, but it is something I personally believe is extremely difficult to replicate. If I was training someone on how to play Survivor, this is not the game style I would personally attempt to replicate or encourage others to replicate. Even Rob himself has played the game 5 times, played very similarly 5 times, and only succeeded twice as he was able to get Amber the win in Survivor All Stars. But even so, playing with this game style even if you do get to the end is risky, as if you are the one leading the us versus them mentality, then it can be very difficult to get the votes by the jury. Now I have to give him major credit for pulling this off, as again it was absolutely brilliant and insanely impressive with the cast he was given to play with, which is why it comes in this position. But overall, across multiple seasons of Survivor, I would much prefer the other long-term strategies than this. And that leads me to a very similar way of playing in Tom Westerman's win in Survivor Palau. Tong's long-term strategy was to lead, to win, and to dominate. He was able to lead his tribe in the pre-merge without attending a single tribal council, and then he was able to dominate challenges in the post-merge, winning 5 total, and with the numbers in his alliance he could ensure himself getting all the way to the end, and if he can get to the end and do that, he deserves to win, point blank. Now again, this is an extremely difficult strategy to pull off, especially in Modern Survivor when there are a range of challenges outside of just being physical. We've seen the likes of Ozzy and Joe, challenge beasts in this game, attempt to win in this manner and they fail every single time. So again, the likelihood of being a leader and being so physically dominant is just a walking target in Modern Survivor. The way Tom was able to do this is honestly one of the most impressive wins in Survivor you could ever imagine. And if you are so gifted physically and mentally, then sure, go for it. But to your average Survivor player, this is another one that is close to impossible to replicate in future seasons of the show. But for Tom, and at this time of filming, it was absolutely brilliant. So up next, we have another old school winner in Brian Heidick, the winner of Survivor Thailand. A part of Brian's long-term strategy is something that we see quite often in Modern Survivor, and that is basically creating a final 2 deal with everyone. Sure, this is basically Survivor 101 now, but we need to give credit where credit is due in making this strategy possible. A part of this strategy involved 2 key factors. The first was locking up jury votes. Sure, he only won in a 4-3 vote, but he knew he had 4 votes guaranteed, and that's all he needed to win. The second factor was he brought someone to the end he knew he could beat, a GOAT, which again has evolved into a lot of seasons today. Due to this, I think having all of these combinations are successful strategies in basically every season of Survivor. Having multiple final 2 or final 3 deals is basically essential. Bringing someone to the end that you think you can beat is also highly recommended. And if you have the majority of jury votes locked up, then you will win the game. It's a phenomenal long-term strategy, and a strategy that is now so obvious in Survivor that we see it every season. Now continuing with the old school theme, up next we're going to go with the great Ethan Zon, the winner of Survivor Africa. Now some people may not even see this as a long-term strategy, but you must remember that everything you do in Survivor is a part of the game. And what Ethan did best was being sociable, being likeable, and being friendly. That's really what made him excel, and what made him win. Just how bloody good of a bloke he is, and how much people wanted to align with him, and award him the $1 million at the end of the game. Now you might think this is a pretty simple way to play the game, but in a game of deception, a game of lying and keeping secrets, it would be a lot harder than it appears on the surface. Being at least somewhat likeable is a must-in Survivor in obtaining the votes at the end of the game. People, especially in modern Survivor, do award strategic play, but personalities and charisma absolutely still come into play when the jury is casting their vote. Say if a person was struggling to pick between two people, they are going to award it to the person they like the most. Ethan is a social powerhouse, and this was a core reason that he won the game. Now moving back to a new school Survivor player, we have the great Jeremy Collins, and his win in Survivor Cambodia, Second Chance. Now Jeremy implemented one of my favourite all-time long-term strategies, and that is the Meatshield strategy. You could argue that Todd did this in China, aligning with the likes of James and John Robert. Or Parvati did this in Micronesia, with again James and also Aussie. But I really think Jeremy really based his whole game around just being surrounded by shields, and that is what really protected him long term. Now it wasn't just one or two threats, it was a full alliance of threats, knowing from his original game that there would be a time where he would be too threatening to his tribe mates, so he needed as much protection as possible. Having Joe, Fishback, Savage, Tasha, Spencer, the lot, all of these huge names, not just physical threats, but social and strategic threats as well, to jump in the firing line if the votes were to come his alliance's way, and it really was executed to perfection. It was the most diverse way of using a shield strategy that we have ever seen in a Survivor season, again using threats from multiple categories to get the win. To me, it is an absolutely fantastic strategy to implement in almost every single season of Survivor. We still often see to this day, man, this person is such a huge threat they need to go early, rather than, man, this person is such a huge threat, I want to keep them around so they can be targeted before me in the latter stages of the game. Even in the most recent season of Survivor Winners at War, I personally would have been aligning with the Boston Robs, the Parvatis and the Sandras. It would be so difficult for any of them to get to the end again, and having them around you for protection would have been a very viable strategy. I am a huge fan of this strategy to say the least, and I think it should be used to some degree by all serious Survivor players. Now the next person is someone who is a very great user of this Meatshield strategy and also executed it well in both his wins, and that is Tony Vlachos. Now focusing on his Cagayan win in this video, you could argue that his long-term strategy was to cause chaos, to backstab everyone and to make rifts in alliances to get to the end. Well, while this is true, I'm also going to focus on the way that he used his advantages that he found within the game, and basically how he increased their power without altering the rules of the advantages themselves. Tony was able to state the power of his idols were different than they actually were, which ultimately heightened his threat level, but so much so that people became fearful of even targeting him in the first place, as they wouldn't know the backlash or consequence of doing so would be. Now if someone has two idols around their neck, it's basically saying, come at me and see what happens, and in turn it turns the target to other individuals in the game. The best example of this was with his super idol, stating the power of it was he could use it at the final four, which everyone bought hook, line and sinker, and really was the lie that got him to the end of the game to get the win. Again, I see this as a genius move, and one that I'm surprised people do not use more often. Dom used it with David Wright's fake idol, which worked a treat, but ultimately in my mind it is not used enough. Now especially with advantages that people know you have, such as if they're one in front of people, like in a challenge or at an auction, you can make that advantage whatever you want it to be, and it is difficult for people, especially close alliance members, to question you. Tony did this remarkably, and it is a core reason for him winning the game. And that leads me to the final long-term strategy I will be discussing in this video, and that is the first two-time winner, Sandra Diaz-Twine. A lot of people called Sandra a weak player, or didn't deserve to win Heroes vs Villains, up against two powerhouses of Parvati and Russell. But there is one key thing she did this season far better than Russell and Parvati, and that was to make friends with the jury. Now going off previous points I've made, the vote in the end depends on only those people sitting there, listening in on tribal councils and no one else. Sometimes it doesn't even matter how strategic you are, or how big of the moves you made were. You need to appeal to the jury to get the votes to win the game, and this season, Sandra did this exquisitely. Sandra was clever enough to notice that the villains were likely to dominate this season after the JT blindside, and she was able to integrate herself with the heroes to become friends with them and to obtain their jury votes. Now, especially in a themed season like this, where there are key themed, such as heroes versus villains, the players are more likely to play into this persona, more than if it was just a standard regular season. Due to this, as the jury consisted predominantly of this hero archetype, they were more likely to vote for someone who had more of these heroic characteristics, rather than a villain. Going back to Rupert's comment in JT's letter to Russell, this is the time to show you are not a villain. Making friends with the jury can only benefit your game in any season of Survivor, and will make you more likely to get the votes at the end. It is a fantastic strategy, and another one I would recommend to all players of the game in the future. So there you have it, 10 of the best long-term strategies by Survivor winners in the history of the game. There have been some amazing roads to victory, and it is phenomenal to see how different paths can result in the same outcome, of the sole survivor. As always, a big thank you to everyone for engaging with my content, and remember to smash like and subscribe for more videos just like this in the future. This is Analytical Strategy, and we are signing out once again. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.